saying her name at the very beginning and then saying her name at the end is almost like saying this is the story of Sasha Thumper, and this is the end of the story about Sasha Thumper. Welcome to the 22nd episode of the Resolution Podcast. You know, we out here just trying to help artists gain clarity on their calling. I'm your host with the most, Alex Lacey. And this week's episode, I'm super stoked. I mentioned in the last episode, is going to be about the one and only, the GOAT, Andre 3000 of Outkast. He is insane lyrically. He's in almost every rapper I've heard, like top 5. And he deserves a podcast to himself, just dedicated to his lyricism. And there's something that I've noticed when I was doing my research for this podcast that I thought was very interesting, because I am an advertising major and I'm a copywriter. So basically what that is like, if you see billboards with like McDonald's saying like those couple words, that's advertising copy. But copywriting is basically just persuasive storytelling in order for you to buy something, essentially. So that's what I study in college. And I noticed something that he does that I thought was very interesting, because it follows a very similar framework or formula that we use in copywriting to get people's attention, to hook them in, and to help them digest information more. And I'll get to that thing at the end. So the 3 songs that I want to focus on for illustrating what Andre 3000 does so well, I'm just going to start referring to him as Dre. So the 3 songs that we're going to focus on today by Andre are going to be The Art of Storytelling Part 1, Aquemini, and Synthesizer. And all 3 of those are from the Aquemini album, which I was listening to a lot over COVID, so it kind of has some emotional ties just to me. So let's dive right in. The first one, The Art of Storytelling. First of all, that beat is insane. It was used by J. Cole in his song Land of the Snakes, which it says L.A., like L.A., Land of the Snakes, which I thought was pretty creative. He used the same beat, and he was saying, like, the hook was like, this the ish I used to roll down Lewis Street with. So it was like, it's kind of a nod to Outkast, like back in the days. This is what he was growing up on. But this podcast isn't about J. Cole. So the beat is insane. Again, and the subject of the story is a girl named Sasha Thumper. Actually, I'm not sure if that's the subject of the story, but Andre is talking about a story that he shared with this girl named Sasha Thumper. And in the beginning, he states, Susie Screw had a partner named Sasha Thumper. And then he gets into, so he starts the subject of the story, and then he gets into when it was taking place, which is the time. And he says, I remember, this is a really interesting thing to note, and I love it so much. I just nerded out when I heard it. I nerded out when I heard it. That's almost a verse right there. Anyway, he says, I remember her number like the summer when they met up. So he doesn't say, I remember her. I remember her number like the summer when they met up, and I can't memorize that lyric right now, but he doesn't necessarily remember her. He remembers her number. So basically he remembers her so well that he remembers her phone number, that he would get in contact with her and like this, that, and the third. So I really like that. If you want to use that in your lyrics when you're talking about somebody that you remember, talk about something that they did or they owned. Like, I remember when he would play this game so well that like it had all of us shocked. Or I remember the smell of his car, and then, yeah, or like this, just something about the subject that you're talking about in your story that isn't necessarily exactly them, if that makes sense. So I really like the way he did that. And the place was a slumber party. But the thing that he masters in this song is painting the scene. He says, 3 a.m, yawning, dancing under street lights in the middle of the ghetto. He says, let's see if I can remember this. 3 in the morning, at 3 in the morning, yawning, dancing under street lights in the middle of the ghetto. No. All right, let's see if I can remember this line. 3 in the morning, yawning, dancing and 3 in the morning, yawning, dancing under street lights. We was chilling like a villain. Had a homie feeling right in the middle of the ghetto on the curb, but in spite of all the BS that we put up. And anyways, I can't get that right, but basically saying what he does is he lists out the scene. He lists out factors or characteristics of the scene that he's painting, which is so good. It's 3 in the morning, yawning, dancing under street lights in the middle of the ghetto. That's basically, he's painting the scene of where they were, like, you could see, like, when I saw the music video, but when I heard it, I could see exactly what he was talking about. Like, just a couple of kids, like, running around at nighttime, like, just kind of jumping from pole to pole, but, like, occasionally, like, just sitting down and yawning because they're all tired. It's late at night. Having those really deep conversations, which he gets into. He says, staring at the stars above, and then he asks, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he says, I said, what you want to be? She said, alive. It made me think for a second, then made me think for a minute, then looked in her eyes. And so just having those really deep conversations in the early hours of the morning, I think we can all relate to that. And so it makes that scene that he paints so well so much more relatable and thus so much more impactful. So he paints the scene very well, just literally listing out the characteristics of what's going on in it. And then he does something that I think is very important, and that is to keep the elements of the story at the forefront. So he does this by saying, time went on, I got grown, rhyme got strong, I came back home. So he was saying, he wasn't necessarily saying, my career started blowing up. I got on the stage at the Grammys and I told everybody, like, yo, the South got something to say. He wasn't talking about his blow up or his fame at all. He's just talking about time went on, things changed, and then he gets back into the story. So he kind of just, in like 4 lines, or no, in 4 rhymes, he basically just says, yeah, and all this stuff happened. And then he cuts back in, kind of adding a nod to his fame and his career progressing, talking about, I wanted to see her I kept singing my song and hoping at a show I would see her standing in the front row. Basically kind of giving a nod like, yeah, I got all famous, but I really want to see this girl from my childhood again. And then something really tragic happens. And that is my last episode talking about the And But So framework, or the formula, framework, formula, whatever. He literally says, he says, but 2 weeks later, she was found in the back of a school with a needle in her arm. Baby, too much do. It's like that now. So he says, but this really tragic thing happened, which is so sad, like overdosing on it. And then the line previous to that scene that he painted so well, we start to see what do you want to be? Like, I said, what you want to be? She said, alive. And that's the tragic irony of this whole thing, is like, she wants to be alive when she grows up. But as time went on and things got better for him, but not necessarily better for her, she wasn't able to be alive when she grew up, which, like, having that tragic irony is so specifically tragic because, like, we have a negativity bias as humans. So having that tragic irony is so powerful. It's a really sad story, but it's told so well. And then he, at the end of his verse for The Art of Storytelling Part 1, he says her name again, Sasha Thampa. So saying her name at the very beginning and then saying her name at the end is almost like saying, this is the story of Sasha Thumper, and this is the end of the story about Sasha Thumper. So you could even title this verse as the story of the tragedy of Sasha Thumper. And at the end of the song, he actually says her name again. So he just says Sasha Thumper. So which ties it back to the very beginning where he said, Susie Screw had a partner named Sasha Thumper. So in the very beginning, he implies this is the story of Sasha Thumper. At the end, he's implying that was the tragedy of Sasha Thumper. Kind of like a resolution. Second one is Aquemini, and that song is it hits me in my feels so hard because I'm gonna nerd out from a production standpoint real fast. There's a special effect that they have on the hi-hats in that song, and it's called a flanger. And it basically has like frequency. To me, it sounds like frequencies like weaving in and out. I actually don't know how a flanger really works that well. I just know it has something to do with manipulating frequencies over time. So they have that on the hi-hat, and it just gives this feel of like this warpy, weird, like just a very, I don't know how to explain it, but it fits the message of the song so well. Just kind of the melancholy, like eerie almost. It's so good, and I don't know why my ear just catches those hi-hats every time I listen to it, but it happens. He actually has 2 verses on that song, Aquemini, and I'm talking, so the second one is much more popular. That's the one that goes, my mind warps and bends, I can't remember the rest of it. I think I only know that one line, but that's it. I want to talk about the first one, though, which is, he kind of delivers it in a very monotone, almost like defeated tone of voice, which is so, I don't know, it's so intriguing to me. He starts with, twice upon a time there was a boy who died, who lived happily ever after, but that's another chapter. And my mind was blown when I actually typed it out, because I have it like typed out in my notes. When he said, twice upon a time there was a boy who died, who lived happily ever after. Basically, he's saying there's one boy who died and then one boy who lived happily ever after. So like death and birth. And I'm like, or no, death and life. I was like, what? I've never heard anybody talk about this. Like, this is insane. And it makes a lot more sense too when you think of the whole premise of the album is Aquemini. I think Big Boy, the second half of Outkast, is Aquarius. And then Andre 3000 is a Gemini, and Gemini are known for having like 2 different personalities, 2 different everything. So it's twice upon a time there was a boy who died, who lived happily ever after, but that's another chapter. So that was crazy to me. And it's just the twice upon a time there was a boy who died. I was like, what the hell? This is genius. And I loved it so much because it plays on the once upon a time, but it's implying that he's telling 2 stories at once. And for the longest time, I was thinking, what is the other story that he's telling? And it's right there in front of me. Twice upon a time, there was a boy who died, who lived happily ever after. So there you go. And then he goes on to describe the setting again, just describing the scene just by listing things out. He says, live from the home of the brave, which is America, with $30, beauty parlors, baby ballers, bowling ball and parlors, street scholars, majoring in culinary arts. You know how to work the bread, cheese, and dough from scratch. See the catches that you can't get caught. I had to listen to this song. I didn't have to. I got to listen to the song a lot for this research. So, but it's really interesting just to see. He wasn't even talking about specific in the first one in The Art of Storytelling. He was talking about 3 a.m, yawning, dancing under street lights in the middle of the ghetto, but on the curb, but in spite all of the BS, staring at the stars above, talking about what we gonna be when we grow up. See, she's what you want to. I said, what you want to be. She says it live. Sorry, I don't know why, but I just memorized that last part. Anyway, so for the first one, he was talking about the time 3 a.m, yawning, dancing under street lights. So he kind of does a time of day and then 2 actions, so yawning and dancing under street lights, and then a place in the middle of the ghetto, and then an action again with staring at the stars above and then having that conversation. In Aquemini, it seems like he's talking about just nouns. So if you want to get into like the names of speech, I guess is what you could call them, he was talking about verbs and times. I guess time is a noun. But he's talking about just nouns in this first verse of the Aquemini track. He says, "Love from the home of the brave, with dirty dollars, beauty parlors, baby ballers, bowling ball and parlors, street scholars, majoring in culinary arts." So it's the first one is the home of the brave, which is a country, that's America, with dirty dollars, a noun, beauty parlors, noun, baby ballers, noun, bowling ball and parlors, and that is, I want to actually get into that line too, because that is a really interesting way that he used to, I think what that is, bowling ball impalas. What I'm picturing is like an Impala, and it's got like an 8-ball on the, what is that? I don't know cars very well, so I'm trying to think of what, it's like the shift, like where you shift gears. I can't remember what that's called, but I think that's what he's kind of describing, bowling ball impalas, like the 8-ball on that shifter. I guess it's just a shifter on, like, in the car of the Impala. And then he goes on to the verse and drops some other crazy lyricism. And then he says, "I'm sorry, y'all, I often drift." And so to me, when I hear that, I think, wow, that is something that's very, very intimate to that artist that is performing right now. It's almost like when they say, "I'm sorry, y'all, I often drift," we're getting a sense of, or at least I do, I get a sense that I am in his head. I have a front row seat to his thoughts. And that's a level of intimacy that we just don't hear nowadays, especially in the 21st century with everything about social media. Photoshop is everywhere. Everybody's like, it's so easy to fake so many things. That doesn't mean everybody's faking everything, but it's so easy to fake things, and a lot of people do. So just having that front row seat to somebody else's thoughts and just seeing them as they come completely unedited is like, man, because I can relate to that too. Like, my mind can spin off in 1,000 different directions. And if I say, "I'm sorry," my mind is just kind of going all over the place. And if I say it, and I think it's his delivery too and his tone of voice, it's like he's very monotone, and it just seems very vulnerable. And that vulnerability is what drives so much of music in general. And we see this too in what actually recently just happened with J. Cole, where J. Cole got that beat from BeatStars. He downloaded it, and then he also said something about how he was searching for a next line, or somebody in the audience searching for a next line. If I was to see J. Cole in the studio writing, which would be incredible, I could see him having like a conversation with me or somebody else in the studio of just like, I'm just searching for that next line. And then that's what he says in the song to me. So I feel like I'm there with him as he's writing it. Maybe that's what I think about specifically for looking for the next line, what J. Cole said. It's like I could see him working on his creative process. But when I hear the "I'm sorry, y'all, I often drift" from Andre 3000, I think I literally have a front row seat to not just his creative process, not just him speaking his mind, but to his mind itself. And that's just something that I just love about that song, and it really stands out to me. Third song, so we did The Art of Storytelling Part 1, Aquemini. The third one we're going to do is Synthesizer, and that definitely gets into much more of a social commentary and where Andre 3000 stands on the development of technology. And that is best described, or in Big Boy too, but that is best described in the hook, where I thought it was super creative the way they delivered this. They said, "Einstein or Frankenstein, Dr. Scholl's or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? Are we digging into new ground or digging our own graves? Story at 11. So it's like, I really like how they had the Story at 11, which is kind of like a breaking news, or not necessarily breaking news, but definitely a news story. But specifically the line of digging into new ground or digging our own graves, because they're kind of the same thing. You're still digging into the ground, but for what intent? Are you digging to build something new, or are you just digging yourself into a hole, so to speak? And the beginning of Andre's verse, he says, synthesizer, microwave me, give me a jug so I can make 7 babies, pump my breasts up. Can you suck the fat up? Please make my life appear like there's no sex. Like, I'm going to hold on, let me get that right. Please make my life appear like ain't no such thing as bad luck. My nose ain't right. Think I need a new one. Just take your pick, or a yellow, a red, a black, or a blue one. So again, he's giving that list of, but in this time it's requests of people basically saying my life isn't right physically, so I'm going to ask these plastic surgeons and this new technology, can you change me to specifically make my life appear like ain't no such thing as bad luck? So at this point, we can really see that Andre 3000 loves lists. In the first one, he was just listing out the actions and the things that are making the scene possible, or that are just in the scene, which is the art of storytelling. In Aquemini, he was talking about the different characters and the different cars in that environment. And the third one, in Synthesizer, he was just listing out requests that people have when it comes to this new technology and how to make their life appear like there ain't no such thing as bad luck. And it's really interesting because as a copywriter, lists are so powerful. And we hear, like, from what I learned about copywriting, it's super easy for people to digest information if it's put it just literally in a bullet point list. And it makes a lot more sense that, oh yeah, I guess I see that too, how he uses it in his songwriting. So if you're wanting to pack a punch with your imagery and your points in your songs, definitely look into using lists. And that's all I got for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I know this is a podcast. It's kind of long form format. So if you made it this far, I really do appreciate it. And I will see you next week. Peace.